Good evening. So now, this is Lucille. And she is awesome.
Listen to them. Children of the night. What music they make.
What is horror when you stop and think about it? I mean, is horror blood and guts? Is it things that go bump in the night? Is it just spooky ghosts? I mean, it's like in some of those movies where they got some video camera going, or security camera, and they got somebody laying in bed, and all of you sit there and you watch it for 15 minutes, and finally you see something move across the room. Well, that can be spooky, but what is horror? Ultimately, horror is really horror of the mind, the psyche. Insanity is the ultimate horror, to be lost within your own mind. Your Alzheimer's units and your dementia patients are full of horror. I would imagine that it's everybody's greatest horror to forget who you are, to forget those around you, to live that psychological trauma. That is true horror. And some stories and some books cover that type of horror. Lovecraft, with his Arkham horror, preyed upon those concepts of the psyche, of the insane. Another type of horror is like in The Thing, where you have this being that biologically mimics and takes over other beings' bodies. And so the scary part in The Thing is that you don't know who's the thing, because it can mimic another human, and you don't know until it tries to take over your body and kill you. And then you have the concept of the horror we find in The Walking Dead. The dead come back to walk. The dead don't come back to visit. You don't get to have a nice chat with Grandpa, but he comes back to eat your brain. And so then you have the whole zombie apocalypse, which actually, the zombie apocalypse movies, in my opinion, aren't necessarily horror movies. They're scary. They have a lot of surprises that happen, but they're not really horror movies. They're more of a Armageddon type movie. I mean, they're more akin to the types of movies that are what if a nuclear bomb hit. There was a movie made many decades ago called The Testament. Very good movie. A nuclear bomb hit, and it was what happens after a nuclear blast in the areas that aren't absolutely decimated by a nuclear blast. What is life like, and the slow deterioration due to cancer that people die of. But to me, The Walking Dead and all your zombie movies are more of an apocalypse type movie. They're not really a horror movie. I mean, really, when you get down to it, Negan in The Walking Dead is a much more frightful character than any of the zombies are, which, by the way, Negan is my favorite character in The Walking Dead. I love his management style. We have to do a whole film on the comparison between Rick and Negan. That is coming soon. There's another aspect about Dracula that I always liked, and that is the whole idea of cemeteries and coffins, and I've always been semi-obsessed with cemeteries. People always thought that I was morbid by wanting to see. If I travel somewhere, then I say I see a cemetery and I have an inclination to stop and look at the cemetery. People always think that I'm weird, and they find cemeteries to be morbid places. To me, cemeteries are not morbid at all. Cemeteries, to me, are outdoor museums. They're just full of history, and the tombstones, if you read them carefully, I mean, if they have something besides just a name and a date, but even a name and a date tells a story. But if you read the tombstones, lots of them have stories. They have things to say. And to me, it's just an outdoor museum. What I like about cemeteries, to me, they're not morbid. Yes, they're full of decaying bodies, but I just don't think of it that way. What I like about cemeteries, what I like about the whole concept of coffins, is the fact that when you put somebody in a coffin, whatever you dress them with, whatever jewelry you put on them, or whatever knickknacks you put with them, I like the idea, like a time capsule. I like the idea that when you close that lid and lock it down and you bury it and you put the vault on top and the earth on top, or if you put them into a mausoleum, the concept that they will stay that way in perpetuity. Now, I know that the body will deteriorate and decompose, and of course, a lot of the fabrics and whatnot will decompose as well. But in essence, most of what's in there will remain in that casket. To me, it's just interesting, and that's one one of the aspects that I always liked about Dracula, because Dracula, whenever he comes out of his coffin, he looks as good as new. He doesn't look decayed and dead and so forth and so on. Although, if you read the book, and that's the way he's portrayed in the movies, if you read the book, he actually looks healthier in the casket than he does when he's walking around, because, let's face it, he's just finished a big meal, and now he's going to go down on a rest. They say in the book he looks a little bit bloated, and he's gorged himself on blood. But I like cemeteries, I like graveyards, I like coffins and caskets, and the whole concept of it. No, I'm not obsessed with death, necessarily. I just like the aspects of that it captures a point in time. That when you close a casket, you've captured a point in time. It's kind of like taking a photograph. You take a photograph and you've captured that moment for all eternity, where at least until the photograph doesn't exist anymore. But I wanted to do Dracula for this Halloween because it allows us to investigate a lot of the deep, deep story that Dracula has, the book has, and to analyze the concepts of immortality and what it means, the pluses and ultimately the minuses of immortality here on Earth. I want to take this moment and talk about Halloween just a little bit, which is aside from Dracula, but connected to it, obviously. Halloween is actually All Hallows Eve. So just like the eve of Christmas, Christmas Eve is the day before Christmas, well, Hallows Eve, Halloween, is the day before All Saints Day. And All Saints Day drags into 2 days, November 1st and 2nd. Originally, and mostly celebrated amongst the Catholics, and if you're Catholic, I guess you know this, but November 1st and 2nd are feast days. They're feast days to celebrate the end of harvest and to prepare yourself for the dark days ahead, meaning the winter months ahead, the shorter days of daylight. Halloween got its root from the concept that if you go back to Catholicism, then you have to believe in heaven and hell, then there's purgatory in the middle. And so when everybody dies, they go to purgatory. It's the waiting area, train station until you catch your train, where you're either going to hell or you're going to heaven. And so if you're in purgatory, you can be there for a very long time. And if you read one of the best books ever written, which was Dante's Divine Comedy, you will find the 3 parts of hell and purgatory and paradise. It's a great read. You should read it. So the idea is that the people who are trapped in purgatory before they go to heaven or hell, whichever where they're going, they are able to come back alive, or not alive, but they're able to walk the earth on Hallows Eve, All Hallows Eve, Halloween. And there was the idea that they could seek vengeance on those that wronged them. So through the superstitions of the Celts and also through the Catholic Church, they also believed that these souls could be satisfied if they received some offering. So homes in Scotland and Germany and Ireland, they would bake these cakes called soul cakes, and they would have a crucifix on them. And the people, the other people in the neighborhood, would dress up like their dead relatives, and they would go from house to house and accept the cakes as an offering. There's where your trick-or-treat comes along. And by doing so, it would bring good fortune to that house through the dark season and into the spring. And it would also satisfy the souls that are on their way to either heaven or hell. Now, whenever the Reformation happened and the church separated, so you had the Protestants and the Catholics, Protestants didn't necessarily go along with the idea of purgatory, but they at the same time believed that yes, that there was these lost souls, but they must be evil souls, sinful souls that are trapped and that they just haven't gone to hell yet. They won't give up the ship. So they believed that they were evil spirits. That's why you have a lot of Protestant religions that don't like to celebrate Halloween, because they have the concept or the belief that Halloween celebrates the evil souls. I don't follow any of this, but it is interesting stuff to read about. Halloween is really a great holiday. I think what would make it an even better holiday is if we actually, everybody celebrated the way I guess the Catholics do, and that is to have a feast on November 1st and 2nd. But I imagine corporations wouldn't want to give everybody the day off for November and 2nd, which was, in a way, that's your fall break. And it would be a fun break. You'd have Halloween, and then you'd have All Saints Day, and then you'd have the day after. So you would have those 3 days as another holiday. I really enjoyed Halloween. My mother really enjoyed Halloween. It was her favorite holiday of the year. She used to like to dress up as a witch or as in a mask. She bought me this mask once from Hollywood, and it was a Wolfman mask. Fortunately, eventually deteriorated, so I don't have it any longer. But it was lots and lots of fun, and she enjoyed Halloween. She loved giving out the candy at Halloween. My father, on the other hand, he wasn't a big fan of Halloween. Mainly, he didn't have anything against it religiously speaking, but he just saw it as another day that the merchants could make money, and he hated the idea of giving merchants money. But he didn't prevent me from going trick-or-treating, and I always came home with a full bag of candy and goodies, which I would only eat a portion of them, and then they would go into a bowl, and people would eat on it until Easter, which we got refilled full of candy when the Easter Bunny came. But Halloween was always a fun holiday, and it's something that I always looked forward to. And then whenever my kids got old enough, we took them trick-or-treating. They no longer trick-or-treat anymore, but I wish they would. I wish I could go back in time. I wish I could go back like Dracula wants to go back and relive the good old days. So I hope you enjoyed this. This is BarbWire Strategy on Dracula. Happy Halloween.
I'm gonna beat the holy hell out of one of you.